Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Shadowscript. Tonight, I invite you to lie down, close your eyes, and let the sound of rain guide you into the shadows of the unknown. What you're about to hear is not just a story. It's a chilling encounter shared by someone on Reddit. A true experience that will make your skin crawl. So get comfortable and prepare yourself for what comes next. Let the rain fall and the horror begin. Our first story was, "There's something watching me from the forest behind my house." I moved to this house 6 months ago, drawn by the promise of solitude and the breathtaking view of the ancient pine forest that stretched endlessly behind my property. The real estate agent had mentioned it was part of a protected wilderness area. No hunting, no camping, just miles of untouched woodland. Perfect for someone like me who needed to escape the chaos of city life. The first few weeks were blissful. I'd wake up to the sound of birdsong, spend my mornings on the back porch with coffee, watching deer graze at the forest's edge. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles away, and I relished the complete silence that fell over the land each evening. But then the watching began. It started as a feeling, that prickly sensation you get when someone's staring at you from behind. I'd be reading on the porch or attending to my small garden, and suddenly my skin would crawl. I turned toward the forest, scanning the tree line, but see nothing except the usual shadows dancing between the trunks. I convinced myself it was just adjustment anxiety. City people aren't used to this kind of isolation, right? But the feeling persisted, growing stronger each day. Soon, I found myself checking the locks on my doors obsessively, drawing the curtains tight before sunset. The first concrete sign came 3 weeks after moving in. I was washing dishes at the kitchen sink, which faces the forest, when I saw it, a pale shape moving between the trees, roughly human-sized, but somehow wrong. Too tall, too thin, moving with an unnatural gliding motion. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself it was a trick of the light, maybe a white birch tree swaying in the wind. But birch trees don't move like that, and there was no wind that evening. The sightings became more frequent, always at dusk, always at the edge of my vision. A flash of something pale disappearing behind a trunk, a shadow that didn't match any tree. Sometimes I catch glimpses of what looked like limbs, arms or legs, but they were too long, too angular to be human. I bought binoculars, determined to get a clear look. For 3 nights, I sat on my porch with them, scanning the forest as darkness fell. Nothing, but I could feel it watching me watch it, playing some sick game of hide and seek. On the 4th night, I saw it clearly. I was about to give up when movement caught my eye about 50 yards into the forest. I raised the binoculars and nearly dropped them. There, standing perfectly still behind a cluster of pines, was a figure unlike anything I'd ever seen. It was humanoid but wrong, at least 8 feet tall, with impossibly long limbs that ended in what looked like elongated fingers. Its skin was pale as moonlight, almost translucent, and its head was too large for its thin neck. But it was the eyes that made my blood freeze. Even from that distance, even through the binoculars, I could see them. Large, black, unblinking, and fixed directly on me. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then it stepped backward into the shadows and vanished. I stumbled inside, hands shaking so badly I could barely lock the door. I called the police. But what could I say? That I saw something scary in the woods? The officer who answered was polite, but clearly thought I was either drunk or delusional. Probably just a bear, ma'am. They can look pretty strange when they rear up on their hind legs. I knew it wasn't a bear. Sleep became impossible. Every night, I'd lie in bed listening for sounds from the forest, footsteps, branches breaking, anything that might indicate the thing was moving closer. Sometimes I'd hear what sounded like tapping on trees, a rhythmic pattern that seemed almost like communication. During the day, I started finding signs, scratches on trees at the forest's edge, too high and too deep to be from any normal animal, strange symbols carved into bark, circles within circles, spirals that seemed to hurt your eyes if you looked too long, and footprints. The footprints were the worst part. They appeared overnight in the soft earth near my back porch. Elongated impressions that looked vaguely human, but all wrong. Too long, too narrow, with what appeared to be claw marks at the tips. They led from the forest to within 20 feet of my house, then stopped abruptly, as if whatever made them had simply vanished. I tried to leave, packed my car twice, but each time I'd get to the end of the driveway and find myself unable to continue. It wasn't fear that stopped me. It was something else, something that felt like invisible threads pulling me back to the house. I'd sit there with the engine running, wanting desperately to flee, but my hands wouldn't turn the steering wheel. The dreams started after my failed escape attempts. Every night, I'd find myself walking through the forest in my sleep, drawn deeper and deeper into its depths. In the dreams, I could hear it calling to me, not with words, but with something that bypassed my ears and spoke directly to my mind. The voice was ancient, hollow, like wind through a cave. "Come closer," it would whisper. "Come see what you really are." I'd wake up with pine needles in my hair and dirt under my fingernails, sometimes finding myself standing at my back door in nothing but my nightgown, my hand reaching for the handle. Last week, I installed motion sensor lights around my property. They trigger constantly throughout the night, illuminating empty spaces. But sometimes, in the brief moment of brightness, I catch glimpses of that pale figure standing just beyond the light's reach, watching, waiting. The tapping grew louder. What had started as gentle rhythmic sounds became thunderous, drumming that echoed through the forest. My neighbors were too far away to hear it, and when I called the Forest Service, they said they'd look into it but never came. 3 nights ago, I found my back door standing wide open when I woke up. I always lock it. I checked it obsessively before bed, but there it was, hanging open like an invitation. In the morning, I found a new symbol carved into the doorframe, a spiral that seemed to pulse when I looked at it directly. 2 nights ago, I woke up to find muddy footprints leading from my back door to my bedroom. They stopped at the foot of my bed, and I could smell something in the air, like wet earth and decay, but underneath it something else, something that reminded me of ozone before a lightning strike. Last night, I saw it again, but this time it was closer, much closer. I was lying in bed, paralyzed by that familiar sensation of being watched, when I saw its shadow through my bedroom window. It was standing right outside, its impossibly tall frame blocking out the stars. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, as it raised one elongated hand and pressed it against the glass. The window began to crack under the pressure, spiderweb fractures spreading outward from where it touched. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't obey. All I could do was lie there and watch as more cracks appeared, the glass groaning under some impossible weight. Then it spoke, not out loud, but inside my head, its voice like static between radio stations. "I've been waiting so long for you to come home." The glass shattered. I must have passed out then, because the next thing I knew, it was morning and I was lying in a bed full of glass fragments. The window was intact, no cracks, no sign of damage. But on my nightstand was something that made my blood run cold. A single pale flower I'd never seen before, its petals arranged in that same spiral pattern I'd been seeing carved into trees. I'm writing this now because I don't think I have much time left. The thing in the forest isn't just watching me anymore. It's communicating with me, and I'm starting to understand what it wants. It wants me to come home. The terrible part is, I'm beginning to remember things that can't be memories. Images of walking through those woods as a child, of playing with something tall and pale among the trees, of a voice that called me its little one, its lost child, who wandered too far from the forest. I'm starting to remember that I've been here before. The house I thought I'd bought 6 months ago. I'm finding evidence I've been living here much longer. Photos in drawers I don't remember taking, showing me in this same house years ago. A journal in my handwriting describing the same experiences I'm having now, but dated 3 years back. I think I've been trapped here, cycling through the same realization over and over. The thing in the forest, it's not a stranger. It's not even really stalking me. It's calling me home. And tonight, when it comes to the window again, I think I'm going to answer. I can hear the tapping starting now, that familiar rhythm echoing through the trees. But this time I recognize it. It's not random drumming, it's a heartbeat. A massive, slow heartbeat that matches the pulse I can feel in my own chest. The sun is setting, and I can see that pale figure emerging from the tree-line. It's not hiding anymore. It's walking directly toward my house, its arms outstretched like a parent welcoming a child home after a long journey. I should be terrified. I should run, but instead I feel relieved, like I'm finally remembering something I'd forgotten long ago. The back door is opening by itself now, and I can smell that familiar scent of earth and ozone. My feet are moving without my permission, carrying me toward the threshold. Welcome home, little one, the voice whispers in my head. Welcome back to where you belong. The forest is calling, and I'm finally ready to answer. If someone finds this, don't come looking for me. The house will be empty soon, waiting for the next person who thinks they're moving somewhere new. But we never really leave, do we? We just forget for a while, until the forest reminds us who we really are. I can see it clearly now through the trees. Not a monster, but family. Ancient, patient family that's been waiting for me to remember. The tapping has stopped. Everything is quiet except for the sound of my bare feet on the forest floor and the whisper of wind through the pines that sounds almost like laughter. I'm going home now. Finally, truly home. Don't follow the pale figures if you see them in your forest. Don't listen to the tapping. And whatever you do, don't try to remember what you've forgotten. Some things are forgotten for a reason. But if you're reading this, it might already be too late. The forest is always looking for its lost children, and it's very, very patient. I never believed in the supernatural until I became a mother. Now, 3 months after bringing my daughter Emma home from the hospital, I'm questioning everything I thought I knew about the world. It started with the baby monitor we received as a gift from our mother-in-law. It was an expensive model with video capability, night vision, and two-way audio. The best money can buy, she'd said with that knowing smile of hers. At the time, I thought it was just another overpriced gadget, but now I wish I'd thrown it in the trash the moment it entered our house. The first few weeks were normal. Emma would cry. I'd hear her through the monitor, and I'd rush to her room. The video feed showed exactly what I expected, my beautiful baby girl in her crib, sometimes sleeping peacefully, sometimes fussing. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then, about a month ago, I started hearing whispers. It was during one of those exhausting nights when Emma had been crying for hours. I was in the kitchen, warming a bottle, when I heard it through the monitor. A soft, almost melodic whispering. At first, I thought it was just static or interference from a neighbor's device. But as I listened more carefully, I realized it sounded like someone was singing a lullaby. The strange part was that Emma had stopped crying. When I checked the video feed, she was lying still in her crib, eyes wide open, staring at something above her that I couldn't see. The whispering continued, growing slightly louder, but I couldn't make out any words. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, yet somehow wrong, like a song played backwards or in a language that didn't exist. I ran upstairs to Emma's room, my heart pounding, but when I opened the door, there was nothing there except my daughter, who looked at me with those deep blue eyes and smiled for the first time in her life. The whispering had stopped the moment I entered the room. I convinced myself it was nothing, maybe interference from another baby monitor, or perhaps I was just sleep-deprived and imagining things. New mothers experience all sorts of strange phenomena, I reasoned, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. The next night, it happened again. This time, the whispers were clearer, more distinct. I could almost make out words, though they seemed to be in a language I didn't recognize. The cadence was rhythmic, almost like a chant. And again, Emma was completely calm, staring upward with that same peaceful expression. I decided to record it. I set up my phone next to the monitor's receiver and waited. Around 2 a.m., the whispering began. This time it was different. There were multiple voices, all whispering in unison, creating an otherworldly chorus that made the hair on my arms stand up. Emma wasn't just calm, she was giggling, a soft, delighted laugh that I'd never heard from her before. When I played back the recording the next morning, there was nothing there. Just Emma's normal baby sounds and the usual static. But I knew what I'd heard. I knew it was real. I started staying awake at night, watching the monitor constantly. The whispers came regularly now, always between 2 and 3 a.m. Sometimes they were soft lullabies. Sometimes they sounded like conversations in that strange, unknowable language, and Emma always responded to them, cooing and smiling as if she understood every word. My husband Mark thought I was losing my mind. "Sleep deprivation," he said. "It's more common than you think. You need to get some rest." But when I begged him to stay awake with me one night, he fell asleep on the couch by midnight and slept through the entire episode. The whispers weren't the only thing. I started noticing other changes in Emma's behavior. She would stare at empty corners of rooms, following something with her eyes that I couldn't see. She would reach toward the ceiling with her tiny hands, grasping at nothing, and she started sleeping through the night. Something that should have been a blessing, but instead filled me with dread. 2 weeks ago, I decided to investigate. I set up a second camera in Emma's room, one that wasn't connected to the monitor system. I wanted to see if the same phenomena would occur without the potentially faulty equipment. What I saw on that independent recording changed everything. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the temperature in Emma's room dropped dramatically. I could see my breath in the video feed. The shadows in the corners of the room began to move, stretching and writhing like living things. And then, hovering just above Emma's crib, I saw them. They weren't human. They were vaguely humanoid in shape, but their proportions were all wrong. Too tall, too thin, with elongated limbs that seemed to bend at impossible angles. Their faces were obscured by darkness, but I could see their mouths moving in perfect synchronization with the whispers I heard through the monitor. There were 3 of them, floating in the air above my daughter, singing their otherworldly lullaby. Emma was reaching up toward them, her tiny fingers grasping at the air, and they were reaching down toward her with those impossibly long arms. I ran to her room, but by the time I got there, they were gone. The temperature had returned to normal, and Emma was sleeping peacefully. But when I picked her up, she was cold to the touch, and her lips had a faint blue tint that disappeared within minutes. I didn't sleep for the next 3 days. I couldn't leave Emma alone, couldn't trust that she was safe. I researched everything I could find about supernatural encounters, about entities that were drawn to children, about haunted baby monitors. Most of what I found were hoaxes or explainable phenomena, but there were a few accounts that were disturbingly similar to mine. One story in particular caught my attention. A mother in Oregon reported similar experiences with her infant son. The whispers, the entities, the strange behavior. But her story had an ending that made my blood run cold. After months of these visitations, her son had simply vanished from his crib one night. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of kidnapping. He was simply gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of something sweet and floral that she couldn't identify. The child was never found. Last night, something changed. The whispers were different, more urgent, more insistent. Emma wasn't just cooing and giggling. She was trying to speak. Real words, or at least what sounded like words in that alien language. And when I looked at the video feed, I saw something that made my heart stop. Emma was floating 6 inches above her mattress. She was suspended in the air, her tiny arms outstretched toward the ceiling, her mouth moving in perfect harmony with the whispers. The entities were closer now, their shadowy forms almost touching her. One of them had extended what looked like a hand, and Emma was reaching for it with desperate eagerness. I screamed and ran to her room, but this time, they didn't disappear when I entered. For a brief moment, I saw them clearly tall, impossibly thin figures with faces that seemed to shift and change like smoke. Their eyes were holes in reality, dark voids that seemed to pull at my sanity. They looked at me with what I can only describe as annoyance, as if I were interrupting something important. Then they were gone, and Emma fell back onto her mattress with a soft thud. She looked at me with those deep blue eyes and smiled, but it wasn't the innocent smile of a baby. It was knowing, ancient, as if she had seen things that no human should ever witness. I've been holding Emma in my arms ever since. I haven't put her down, haven't let her out of my sight. The monitor is unplugged, sitting in the corner of our bedroom like an accusation. Mark thinks I've had a complete breakdown, and maybe I have. He's talking about calling doctors, about getting me help. But I know what I saw. I know what's been happening to my daughter. And I know that tonight, they're going to come for her. As I write this, Emma is sleeping in my arms, but her sleep is too deep, too still. Her breathing is barely perceptible, and her skin has that same cold quality I noticed before. Sometimes, when I look at her face, I see something else looking back at me. Something that isn't my daughter. The whispers have started again, but this time, they're not coming from the monitor. They're coming from Emma herself, soft and melodic, in that alien language that seems to bypass my ears and speak directly to my soul. She's calling to them, I realize. She's been calling to them all along. And as the clock approaches 3 a.m., I can feel them coming. The temperature is dropping, the shadows are moving, and Emma is beginning to stir in my arms. Her eyes are opening, but they're not blue anymore. They're black, like the void I saw in those entities' faces. She's smiling at me now, and when she opens her mouth, the whispers pour out, growing louder and more insistent. She's no longer my daughter. She's something else, something that has been slowly taking her place night after night, fed by those otherworldly lullabies. The baby monitor crackles to life, even though it's unplugged. Through the static, I can hear my own voice, but I'm not speaking. It's saying words I don't recognize, in a language that predates human civilization. And I realize, with growing horror, that I'm not just hearing the whispers anymore. I'm part of them. The entities are here now, floating in the corners of our bedroom, their impossible forms stretching toward us. Emma is reaching for them eagerly, and I find myself lifting her toward them, even though every rational part of my mind is screaming at me to run. But I can't run. I can't resist, because somewhere in the depths of my being, I understand now. They haven't come to take Emma away. They've come to take us home. And as Emma floats from my arms toward those waiting shadows, as our laughter mingles with the whispers that now fill my mind, I realize that the voices in my baby monitor were never just visiting. They were calling us to join them. The last thing I remember is the sweet, floral scent that filled the room as reality began to fade. And somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sound of a baby monitor crackling with static, waiting for the next family to bring it home, found written on scattered papers in the bedroom of the Morrison house. The family has been missing for 2 weeks. The baby monitor was discovered, still plugged in, playing an endless loop of whispers in an unidentifiable language. Local authorities have classified the case as an unexplained disappearance. The monitor has been destroyed, but similar reports continue to surface in the surrounding area. If you've recently purchased a baby monitor with two-way audio capability, check the serial number. If it matches XG 7749B, disconnect it immediately and contact local authorities. Some calls are not meant to be answered. Moving to a new city for graduate school was supposed to be exciting, but finding affordable housing near campus proved to be a nightmare. After weeks of searching, I finally found a small apartment in an old Victorian house that had been converted into units. The rent was suspiciously cheap, but the landlord, Mrs. Chun, explained that the building was old and had some quirks. I was desperate, so I signed a lease without hesitation. The apartment was on the 2nd floor, with creaky hardwood floors and tall windows that let in streams of dusty sunlight. It had character, I told myself, trying to ignore the way the walls seemed to groan at night, or how the temperature dropped suddenly in certain corners. For the first few weeks, I attributed these oddities to the building's age. It was while trying to maximize my storage space that I made the discovery. I was measuring the walls of my bedroom to see if I could fit a bookshelf when I noticed something odd. According to my measurements, there was about 4 feet of space that seemed to be missing. The wall between my bedroom and what I assumed was the neighboring apartment was much thicker than it should have been. I ran my hands along the wall, feeling for any irregularities. Near the corner, hidden behind where my dresser had been positioned, my fingers found a slight depression in the wallpaper. When I pressed it, I heard a soft click, and a section of the wall swung inward like a door. My heart hammered as I peered into the darkness beyond. The air that wafted out was stale and cold, carrying a musty smell that made my stomach turn. I grabbed my phone's flashlight and stepped inside. The hidden room was smaller than I'd expected, about the size of a large closet, but it was clearly meant to be lived in. There was a narrow bed pushed against one wall, its mattress yellowed and sagging. A small wooden table sat in the corner, covered in what looked like journals and notebooks. Shelves lined the walls, filled with canned goods, water bottles, and other supplies. But it was the photographs that made my blood run cold. They were taped to every available surface on the walls, hundreds of them, and they were all of the same person me. Pictures of me moving into the apartment, carrying boxes, sitting at my kitchen table, sleeping in my bed. Some were taken through my windows. Others seemed to be taken from inside my apartment when I wasn't home. My hands shook as I picked up one of the notebooks from the table. The handwriting was cramped and erratic, documenting my daily routine in disturbing detail. What time I woke up, what I ate for breakfast, when I left for classes, when I came home. There were notes about my habits, my preferences, even speculation about my thoughts and feelings. The entries went back 3 months, starting before I had even viewed the apartment. I backed out of the room, my mind reeling. Someone had been living in my walls, watching me, documenting my every move. The thought made my skin crawl. I had to get out of there immediately. I was throwing clothes into a suitcase when I heard it, a soft scraping sound coming from inside the walls. Then footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving through the hidden space. I froze, barely breathing, as the sounds grew closer. The secret door, which I had left slightly ajar, began to swing open. I didn't wait to see who emerged. I grabbed my keys and phone and ran, not bothering to close my apartment door behind me. I made it to my car and drove straight to the police station, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. The officers who accompanied me back to the apartment found the hidden room exactly as I had described it. The photographs, the journals, the evidence of someone living in my walls. It was all there, but whoever had been hiding in that space was gone. Detective Martinez, who took my statement, explained that the building had several similar hidden spaces, remnants from when it was a single-family home. Someone had been using them to move through the building undetected, accessing different apartments through concealed doors. We've had reports from other tenants, he told me grimly. Strange noises, missing items, the feeling of being watched. We think someone has been living in these walls for months, possibly years. They found evidence that the intruder had been accessing multiple apartments in the building. In one unit, they discovered a collection of stolen personal items, jewelry, clothing, photographs. In another, they found holes drilled through the walls, providing viewing access to the apartment beyond. The investigation revealed that Mrs. Chun, the landlord, had been aware of the hidden spaces, but had chosen not to disclose them to tenants. She claimed she didn't know someone was living in them, but the police found evidence suggesting otherwise. She was arrested as an accessory, but they never found the person who had been living in the walls. I moved out immediately, staying with a friend until I could find a new place. For weeks afterward, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every shadow seemed to conceal a figure. Every unexpected sound made me jump. I would check and double-check my locks, scan my new apartment for any signs of intrusion. The worst part was not knowing who it had been. The journals referred to me as the subject or her, but provided no clues about the author's identity. The handwriting analysis was inconclusive, and there were no fingerprints. Whoever it was had been careful to wear gloves. 2 months later, I received a package at my new address. Inside was a photograph of me sitting in my current apartment, reading a book. On the back, someone had written in that same cramped handwriting, "Found you." I moved again immediately, this time to a different city entirely. I changed my phone number, my email address, even my name on social media. I thought I had finally escaped. But last week, I found something that made my blood turn to ice. I was cleaning out my car when I discovered a small GPS tracking device attached to the underside of my bumper. It was the kind used by private investigators, nearly invisible unless you knew what to look for. According to the serial number, it had been placed there recently. I removed it and threw it in a dumpster across town, but the damage was done. Whoever had been living in my walls had found me again. They had been tracking my movements, learning my new routines, preparing for their next move. I don't know what they want from me. I don't know why they chose me as their target, but I know they're still out there, still watching, still waiting. I've installed security cameras, changed my locks, even hired a private investigator of my own. But I can't escape the feeling that none of it matters. They found me once, they found me again, and they'll keep finding me no matter where I go. Sometimes, late at night, I think I can hear them moving through the walls of my new apartment. Soft footsteps, gentle scraping sounds, the whisper of fabric against wood. I tell myself it's just the building settling, just my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I know the truth. They're still there, still watching, still waiting, and I don't think they'll ever stop. The police advised me to keep moving, to never stay in one place too long. They said that eventually, a person would make a mistake, leave evidence, reveal themselves. But it's been 8 months now, and I'm starting to think they're wrong. I'm starting to think this is my life now. Always looking over my shoulder, always wondering if the next apartment I move into will have hidden spaces in the walls, always knowing that somewhere out there, someone is watching, waiting, documenting my every move. If you're reading this, if you're looking for an apartment, please be careful. Check the walls, measure the rooms, look for spaces that don't quite add up. Because sometimes the walls have eyes, and sometimes those eyes belong to someone who has been waiting for you to come home. After his divorce and job loss, the narrator finds solace hiking Devil's Peak. On an October morning, he decides to venture deeper into the wilderness than ever before, planning a 2-day solo camping trip to Miller's Clearing. The day starts perfectly with crisp autumn air and golden sunlight filtering through the trees. Around noon, everything changes. The well-researched trail he's been following simply vanishes, not gradually, but completely. His GPS shows static, his phone has no signal, and his compass spins wildly. The forest around him seems different. Trees too tall, too perfectly arranged, unnaturally quiet with no birds or insects. Then he hears whistling, the house of the rising sun, the same song he always whistles while hiking alone. But the sound comes from ahead, deeper in the woods, with a hollow, cave-like quality. Despite every instinct warning him to turn back, he follows the sound. His watch stops at 2:17, and the sun remains frozen at the same afternoon angle. The forest grows stranger as he walks, trees too symmetrical, undergrowth too organized, everything unnaturally clean and arranged. After hours of following the whistling, he breaks through a tree line into a perfectly circular clearing ringed by massive pines. In the center is a campsite identical to his own setup. Same tent, same backpack, same hiking boots. But most terrifying is the man sitting by the cold fire pit, an exact duplicate of himself, down to the same scar, same missing tooth, same torn pants, same everything. "You're early," the duplicate says in his exact voice. "I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow." The other version explains that this isn't his world. He stepped off his intended path into parallel territory. He claims they're connected beings from different realities, and the forest has rules, one consciousness per vessel. Two identical people can't exist in the same focused space without creating paradoxes. The duplicate reveals he's been waiting 3 years for this moment. One of them must stay and become part of the forest boundary between worlds, while the other can leave. He knows intimate details about the narrator's life, his ex-wife Sarah, hidden secrets, his thoughts of disappearing into the wilderness. "We're connected," the duplicate explains. "I'm you from the path you didn't take, where you made different choices, fought harder for your marriage, didn't give up on your career." Terrified, the narrator runs. The forest erupts around him, trees twisting, ground shifting, roots trying to trip him. He hears his own laughter echoing from multiple directions as the duplicate calls out, "You can't run from yourself." He collapses by a black stream that reflects nothing. The duplicate appears on the other side, explaining he's been trapped here for 3 years, waiting for someone to take his place. He offers to let the narrator become the guardian who waits for the next lost hiker. But the narrator realizes something crucial. The duplicate might not be him at all, but what's left of someone who came here before. The duplicate is translucent, moving like he's underwater, with that hollow voice quality. When the narrator's phone suddenly works, showing a message to turn around and walk back, the duplicate lunges, but passes right through the device. The narrator understands the forest doesn't need guardians, it needs food. It feeds on lost people ready to give up on life, and the duplicate has been luring them here for 3 years. As the narrator walks away, the duplicate screams and becomes more transparent. Following the stream back, the narrator feels something he hadn't felt in years: purpose and clarity. The trees thin, normal forest sounds return. His compass works, and time resumes. He emerges on a familiar trail with Miller's clearing visible in the distance. Only an hour has passed since he got lost. That night, camping normally, he listens for whistling but hears only real wilderness sounds. He never finds that trail again, though sometimes glimpses it peripherally. Late at night, he hears distant whistling, a sad, hollow version of the House of the Rising Sun from someone who sounds like him, but isn't quite right. He's stopped hiking alone since then. Learning some paths are too dangerous for solo journeys, but on quiet nights, he still hears the whistling and wonders if he made the right choice. Part of him questions if he's still there in those woods, if the person living this life is just another echo. Sometimes his reflection seems to lag behind his movements, as if deciding whether to copy him or go its own way. He thinks about trails that appear and disappear, choices that echo across impossible distances, thin places where worlds bleed into each other. The forest remembers everything, every footstep, every decision, every lost soul. Maybe somewhere in those deep woods, there's still a campsite with someone who looks exactly like him, still whistling, still waiting for another chance to trade places. The forest is patient and always hungry for travelers who've lost their way, who are running from something, who are ready to disappear into the spaces between heartbeats. I should know, he concludes. After all, I've been there, haven't I? I never thought I'd be writing this, but after what happened last month, I can't keep it to myself anymore. My therapist says writing it down might help, but honestly, I don't think anything will help me sleep through the night again. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio, the kind of place where people know their neighbors, where kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on, and where the most exciting thing that happens is Mrs. Henderson's cat getting stuck in a tree. Or at least, that's what I thought until 3 weeks ago. My house sits on a corner lot, and my bedroom window faces directly into my neighbor's backyard. The neighbor, Mr. Garrett, moved in about 6 months ago. He's a quiet man, probably in his 50s, keeps to himself mostly, never caused any trouble, never even played music too loud. The perfect neighbor, really. I've always been a light sleeper. My wife, Sarah, used to joke that I could hear a pin drop 3 houses away. She wasn't wrong. So when I heard the soft scraping sound that Tuesday night, my eyes snapped open immediately. The digital clock on my nightstand read 3:17 a.m. Sarah was fast asleep beside me, her breathing slow and steady. I lay there for a moment listening. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was rhythmic, like someone was digging. I slipped out of bed and padded to the window. The moon was nearly full that night, casting everything in an eerie silver glow. That's when I saw him. A man stood in Mr. Garrett's backyard, about 20 feet from the fence line. He was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing dark clothing that made him blend into the shadows. But what made my blood run cold was what he was doing. He was digging. Not just digging, but digging with purpose. The hole was already about 3 feet deep. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was dreaming. But no, he was still there, still digging. The soft scraping sound drifted through my window with each shovelful of earth. My first instinct was to call the police. I mean, someone was clearly trespassing on my neighbor's property in the middle of the night. But something made me hesitate. What if it was Mr. Garrett himself? Maybe he was doing some late-night gardening project. People do weird things sometimes. I squinted through the darkness, trying to make out the man's features. He was too far away, and the shadows were too deep. But his movements were so deliberate, so methodical. This wasn't random. This was planned. I watched for nearly an hour. The man never stopped, never took a break, just kept digging. The hole grew deeper and deeper. 4 feet. 5 feet. How deep was he planning to go? Finally, around 4:30 a.m., he stopped. He set the shovel aside and disappeared into the darkness between the houses. I waited by the window for another 30 minutes, but he never came back. The hole remained, a dark scar in the otherwise pristine lawn. The next morning, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I kept thinking about what I'd seen. Over coffee, I casually mentioned to Sarah that I'd seen someone in the Garrett's backyard the night before. Probably just Mr. Garrett doing some yard work, she said, not looking up from her newspaper. At 3 in the morning? She shrugged. Some people are night owls. Maybe he couldn't sleep. I wanted to believe her, but something felt wrong. After Sarah left for work, I went to my backyard and looked over the fence. The hole was still there, exactly as I'd seen it. But now, in the daylight, I could see something else. The dirt around the hole was darker than the rest of the yard. Not just darker, but different, like it had been mixed with something. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling. That evening, I made a point of being friendly when I saw Mr. Garrett getting his mail. "Nice weather we're having," I said. He looked up, startled. "Oh yes, very nice. Doing any gardening lately? I thought I heard some digging last night." His face went pale. Not just pale, but white as a sheet. No gardening. Must have been someone else. But the way he said it, the way his hand shook slightly as he shuffled through his mail, told me everything I needed to know. He was lying. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept watching the window, waiting. Sure enough, at 3:15 a.m., I heard the scraping again. This time, I was ready. I grabbed my phone and positioned myself at the window. The same man was back, but this time, he wasn't digging. He was filling the hole back in, shovelful by shovelful. He was erasing the evidence of whatever he'd done. It took him about 2 hours to completely fill it in and smooth the surface. I managed to take a few photos with my phone, but they came out blurry in the darkness. Still, I had something. Proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The next few days were torture. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd witnessed. What had been in that hole? Why fill it back in? And why do it at 3 in the morning? I started paying more attention to Mr. Garrett. He seemed nervous, jumpy. He'd installed new security cameras around his house, and he kept his curtains drawn tight. When I waved at him from across the street, he'd duck his head and hurry inside. Then, on Friday, I saw the news story. A local woman named Jennifer Mills had been reported missing. She disappeared the previous Tuesday night, the same night I'd first seen the digging. The police were asking anyone with information to come forward. Jennifer Mills. I recognized the name. She lived 3 streets over. I'd seen her at the grocery store, the local coffee shop. She was young, maybe 30, with blonde hair and a bright smile. And according to the news report, she'd last been seen leaving a bar downtown around 1 a.m. on Tuesday night. The timeline fit perfectly. She disappeared Tuesday night. I saw the digging Tuesday night. The hole was filled on Wednesday night. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to call the police. Detective Martinez arrived at my house the next morning. He was a serious man with tired eyes, the kind of cop who'd seen too much. I told him everything I'd witnessed, showed him the blurry photos on my phone. "You sure it was Tuesday night?" he asked. "Positive. I remember because it was the night before my wife's doctor appointment." He wrote everything down, asked me to repeat certain details. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Would you be willing to testify to what you saw?" I hesitated. Testify against my neighbor, the man who lived 20 feet from my front door? But then I thought about Jennifer Mills, about her family, who didn't know where she was. "Yes," I said, "I'll testify." That afternoon, I watched from my window as police cars surrounded Mr. Garrett's house. They had a search warrant. I saw them in his backyard, saw them bring in ground-penetrating radar equipment. My heart pounded as I watched them work. It took them 3 hours to find it. The area where the hole had been looked perfectly normal. The grass already starting to grow back. But the radar didn't lie. There was something down there. I'll never forget the moment they started digging. Mr. Garrett stood on his porch in handcuffs, his face a mask of resignation. The officers worked carefully, methodically. 5 feet down, The shovels hit something that wasn't dirt. It was a large plastic tarp. Inside the tarp was Jennifer Mills. The story made national news. Suburban neighbor helped solve murder case. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt sick. For 3 weeks, I'd been living 20 feet away from a killer. For 3 weeks, I'd been waving at a man who'd murdered someone and buried them in his backyard. The trial was a nightmare. I had to sit in that courtroom and look at Mr. Garrett. Had to describe what I'd seen that night. His lawyer tried to discredit my testimony, suggested I'd been dreaming, that I was mistaken about the dates and times. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forensics team found Jennifer's DNA in Mr. Garrett's garage. Security cameras from downtown showed him following her when she left the bar. And most damning of all, they found a second body in his backyard. A woman named Patricia Vance who'd been reported missing 6 months earlier, right around the time Mr. Garrett moved into the neighborhood. He was convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. But the story doesn't end there. That's what I thought anyway. I thought catching Mr. Garrett would bring some kind of peace, some closure. I was wrong. The nightmares started about a week after the trial ended. Not nightmares about the trial or the murders, but about the digging. Every night, I dream about standing at my window, watching someone dig in the backyard. But in the dreams, the person doing the digging would turn and look at me. And it would be Jennifer Mills. Her face would be pale and dirt-stained. Her eyes would be hollow sockets, and she'd mouth the words, "Why didn't you help me?" I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding. Sarah tried to be supportive, but I could see the strain in her eyes. She started sleeping in the guest room, said my thrashing was keeping her awake. The sleepless nights turned into sleepless weeks. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying not to look out the window, because sometimes, in the corner of my eye, I'd see movement in the backyard. Not Mr. Garrett's backyard, but my own. It started small. A shovel leaning against the fence that hadn't been there before. A small mound of dirt near the back corner of the yard. I'd go outside in the morning to check, and everything would be normal. But I knew what I'd seen. Then came the night I saw her. I was lying in bed, trying to read, when I heard the scraping sound again. The same rhythmic scraping I'd heard 3 months earlier. My blood turned to ice. I forced myself to get up, forced myself to look out the window. There, in my own backyard, was a figure digging. But this time, I could see her clearly in the moonlight. It was Jennifer Mills. She was exactly as she'd appeared in the news photos. Blonde hair, bright smile. Except her skin was pale and her clothes were dirty. She was digging a hole in my backyard. The same methodical movements I'd seen Mr. Garrett make. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't obey. I could only stand there and watch as she dug deeper and deeper. Then she stopped. She set the shovel aside and looked up at my window. Our eyes met, and she smiled. Not the bright smile from the photos, but something cold and knowing. "Thank you," she mouthed, though no sound reached my ears. Then she was gone, not walking away, not disappearing into the shadows, just gone. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my bed, covers pulled up to my chin. When morning came, I raced to the backyard. The grass was undisturbed. No hole, no signs of digging, no shovel. Everything was exactly as it should be. But I knew what I'd seen, and I knew it wasn't over. The next night, she was back. This time, she was filling in the hole. The same process I'd watched Mr. Garrett perform, but in reverse. She'd dig at night, fill it in before dawn. Night after night, the same routine. I started sleeping with the lights on. I hung heavy curtains over the bedroom window. I even considered moving, selling the house, and starting over somewhere else. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wouldn't matter, that she'd follow me wherever I went. Sarah finally had enough. She said I was having a breakdown, that I needed professional help. She packed a bag and went to stay with her sister. Said she'd come back when I got my head straight. That was 2 weeks ago. I haven't seen Sarah since. I haven't seen Jennifer Mills since then either, but I know she's still out there, still digging, still watching. I've been thinking about what happened, trying to understand why I'm being haunted by the victim instead of feeling peace for helping bring her justice. Then it hit me. I watched her being murdered. I watched the killer dig her grave, and I did nothing. I told myself I didn't know what was happening, that I thought it might be Mr. Garrett doing yard work, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I felt it in my bones, and I chose to do nothing. I could have called the police that first night. I could have shouted out my window, scared him away. I could have done something, anything, to save her life, but I didn't. I was a coward. I watched a woman die and did nothing to stop it. The truth is, I'm not being haunted by Jennifer Mills. I'm being haunted by my own guilt, by the knowledge that I could have saved her life, but chose not to get involved. They say confession is good for the soul. I hope that's true, because my soul needs all the help it can get. I hear the scraping sound again. It's 3:17 a.m., and someone is digging in my backyard. This time, I'm not going to look. I never believed in supernatural bullshit until 3 weeks ago. Now I can't sleep without checking every shadow in my room twice. I'm writing this because I need to get it out, and maybe someone can explain what the hell we found in those woods. My name is Jake, and I'm a college sophomore. My roommate Marcus and I are both photography majors, always looking for unique shots for our portfolios. That's how we ended up in the Whitmore Woods that October afternoon, about 2 hours north of campus. The place had this reputation for being creepy. Locals avoided it, especially after dark. Perfect for some atmospheric shots, we thought. The deeper we hiked, the more unsettling it became. The trees grew so thick that barely any sunlight penetrated the canopy. Everything was eerily quiet, like the forest was holding its breath. Even our footsteps seemed muffled by the thick carpet of rotting leaves. That's when Marcus spotted it, a weathered canvas bag hanging from a low branch about 50 feet off the main trail. It looked like it had been there for months, maybe years. The fabric was stained and torn, but something inside had kept its shape. Probably just trash, Marcus said, but curiosity got the better of us. We pushed through the undergrowth and carefully pulled the bag down. Inside was an old film camera, a vintage Polaroid from the 1970s. The leather was cracked and faded, but the camera itself seemed to be in working condition. More importantly, there were dozens of instant photos scattered in the bottom of the bag. We should have left it there. God, we should have walked away. But we didn't. We gathered up the photos and took them back to our dorm room. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, we spread them out on Marcus's desk. At first glance, they seemed like typical nature photography. Trees, rocks, wildlife. But as we looked closer, something felt wrong. The photos were all taken in the same woods where we'd found the camera. We recognized several landmarks: the twisted oak tree, the moss-covered boulder, the small creek that ran through the eastern section. But in every single photo, there was something that shouldn't have been there. In the background of each image, barely visible unless you were really looking, was a figure. Not a person exactly, but something tall and impossibly thin, always standing among the trees. It never moved between shots, but it appeared in different locations, as if it was following whoever had taken the photos. It's probably just a trick of light and shadows, Marcus said, but his voice was shaky. Or maybe someone was playing a prank, putting a mannequin in different spots. I wanted to believe him, but there was something about the figure that made my skin crawl. It was too tall, too angular, and in a few of the clearest shots, I could swear I saw it looking directly at the camera. We almost threw the photos away that night. We should have. Instead, we did what any stupid college kids would do. We decided to go back to the woods and investigate. The next morning, we loaded up with all our camera equipment and headed back to Whitmore Woods. We brought the old Polaroid too, along with a fresh pack of film we'd bought at a vintage camera shop. The plan was simple: recreate some of the shots and see if we could spot whatever had been lurking in the original photos. The forest felt different in daylight, but still unsettling. We made our way to the twisted oak tree from the first photo and set up our shots. I used my digital camera while Marcus experimented with the old Polaroid. The film was expensive, so we were careful with each shot. The first few photos came out normal, just trees and shadows. But then Marcus took a shot of the moss-covered boulder, and when the Polaroid developed, we both froze. There it was, the figure, standing about 20 feet behind the boulder, partially obscured by the trees. It was clearer in this shot than in any of the old photos. Tall and possibly thin, with arms that seemed too long for its body, and it was looking right at us. "What the fuck?" Marcus whispered. We both spun around to look at the actual boulder, but there was nothing there. Just empty forest. My hands were shaking as I raised my digital camera and took a shot of the same area. When I checked the LCD screen, the image showed nothing but trees and rocks. Whatever was appearing in the Polaroid photos wasn't visible to digital cameras or the naked eye. We should have left then. We should have run. But we were young and stupid and thought we were dealing with some kind of optical illusion or chemical reaction in the old film. We kept taking photos. With each shot, the figure appeared closer. In the next photo, it was standing beside the boulder. In the one after that, it was only 10 feet away from where we were standing. By the time we'd used half the film pack, it was close enough that we could see details. It wasn't human. The proportions were all wrong. Too tall, too thin, with joints that bent in impossible directions. Its face was the worst part. Where features should have been, there was just smooth, pale skin stretched over what might have been a skull. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just blank, terrible emptiness. The last photo we took showed the figure reaching toward the camera with one impossibly long arm. Its fingers, if they could be called fingers, were stretched out like it was trying to touch the lens. That's when we heard the sound. It started as a low humming, almost like electrical interference, but it grew louder and more complex, becoming something that might have been a voice if voices could come from nightmares. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, reverberating through the trees around us. We ran. We grabbed our equipment and ran through the forest like our lives depended on it. Behind us, the humming grew louder, more insistent. I could hear branches breaking, like something large was moving through the woods in pursuit. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. Marcus fumbled with the keys while I kept looking back at the tree line, expecting to see that terrible figure emerge from the shadows. But the forest was quiet again, as if nothing had happened. We drove back to campus in silence. It wasn't until we were safely in our dorm room that we looked at the final Polaroid photo, the one showing the figure reaching toward the camera. The photo was different now. The figure was gone, but in its place was something else. A message, written in spidery handwriting across the white border of the photo. "Found you." That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, our lives have become a living nightmare. It started with the dreams. Every night, Marcus and I would have the same dream. We're back in the woods, but this time we can't leave. The figure's always there, always watching, always getting closer. We wake up exhausted, like we've been running all night. Then the photos started appearing. New Polaroid photos, showing up in our dorm room, under our pillows, in our textbooks, taped to the inside of our lockers. Always showing the same thing, the figure, but now it's in places we recognize. The campus library, the dining hall, the quad where we hang out between classes. And it's getting closer. The most recent photo was slipped under our door this morning. It shows the figure standing in the hallway outside our room. According to the timestamp on the photo, it was taken at 3:17 a.m. We were both asleep at that time. But I remember waking up around then with the feeling that someone was watching me. I don't know what we unleashed in those woods. I don't know what that camera was doing there or who took those original photos. But I know that whatever we found has followed us home. Marcus is talking about dropping out of school and moving back in with his parents across the country. I don't blame him. I'm considering it too. But I have a terrible feeling that distance won't matter. That thing found us once, and it will find us again. The worst part is the waiting, knowing that it's out there, watching, getting closer with each passing day. The photos are like a countdown, and I'm terrified of what happens when it reaches 0. I keep telling myself that there has to be a logical explanation, that maybe the camera was treated with some kind of chemical that creates false images, that maybe someone is playing an elaborate prank. But I can't explain the dreams, or the way the temperature drops whenever we find a new photo, or the sound of something moving in the walls of our dorm room late at night. Last night, I thought I saw it. I was coming back from the library around midnight when I caught a glimpse of something impossibly tall standing between two buildings. When I looked directly at it, nothing was there, but I could feel it watching me as I hurried back to my room. I don't know how much longer we can take this. Marcus has stopped eating, stopped going to classes. He just sits in his bed, staring at the wall, mumbling about going back to the woods. He says maybe if we return the camera, it will leave us alone. I think he's losing his mind. Hell, maybe we both are. But I'm starting to think he might be right. Maybe the only way to end this is to go back to where it started. To return the camera to that bag in the woods and hope that whatever we disturbed will go back to sleep. The problem is, I don't think it wants the camera back. I think it wants us. If you're reading this and you ever find an old camera in the woods, or anywhere else for that matter, leave it alone. Don't take it home. Don't look at the photos. Don't try to use it. Some things are better left undisturbed. But if you do find yourself in a situation like ours, if you start seeing things in photos that shouldn't be there, if you start having dreams about impossible figures in dark woods, then run. Run as far and as fast as you can, because once it finds you, it never stops looking. I can hear something moving in the hallway outside our room right now. The fluorescent lights are flickering, and there's that familiar humming sound growing louder. Marcus is sitting up in his bed, staring at the door with wide, terrified eyes. I think our time is up. If anyone finds this story, know that we try to warn you. That camera is still out there somewhere, waiting for the next curious person to pick it up. Don't let it be you. The door handle is turning. Oh God, it's here. I never believed in paranormal stuff until I moved into that house on Maple Street. It was a steal for the price. A beautiful Victorian that had been on the market for months. The realtor was eager to close, almost too eager, but I figured it was just the housing market being what it was. The first few weeks were normal. I was busy unpacking, sitting in my home office, getting used to the creaking floors and settling sounds that old houses make. But then the knocking started. It began softly, just a few gentle taps from somewhere inside the walls. At first, I thought it was pipes or maybe rodents. Old houses have all sorts of quirks, right? I'd hear it mostly at night, coming from different rooms. 3 knocks, then silence. Always 3 knocks. I called a plumber. He checked every pipe, every joint, even crawled under the house. Nothing. No loose pipes, no leaks, no reason for knocking sounds. He suggested maybe it was squirrels or raccoons, but when I had an exterminator come out, he found no signs of animals either. The knocking got louder. By the 3rd week, it wasn't just gentle tapping anymore. It was deliberate, rhythmic knocking that seemed to move through the house. I'd be in the kitchen and hear it from the living room wall. I'd go investigate, and it would start up in the bedroom. It was like something was following me, staying just out of sight. I started documenting it. Every time I heard the knocking, I'd write down the time, location, and duration. The pattern became clear. It happened most frequently between 2 and 4 a.m., and it was always 3 knocks, followed by a pause, then 3 more knocks. Sleep became impossible. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for it to start, and it always did. The worst part was that it seemed to know when I was listening. If I held my breath, trying to pinpoint the exact location, the knocking would stop, but the moment I relaxed, it would resume, sometimes from a completely different part of the house. I tried everything. I played music loudly to mask the sound, wore earplugs, even slept in my car a few nights. But somehow, even through the earplugs, I could still hear it. That steady, insistent knocking that seemed to vibrate through my bones. After a month of this, I was a wreck. My work was suffering, my friends were worried, and I was starting to question my sanity. That's when I decided to tear into the walls. I started with the living room wall, where the knocking seemed strongest. I cut through the drywall carefully, expecting to find pipes or wiring or maybe evidence of animals. What I found was worse than anything I could have imagined. The space between the walls was normal, just insulation and wooden beams. But carved into one of the support beams were dozens of tally marks. They were old, weathered, like someone had been scratching them into the wood for years. And below the tally marks in faded, shaky handwriting, were the words, Day 1247, still here, still knocking. My blood ran cold. I pulled out my phone and shined the flashlight deeper into the wall cavity. That's when I saw them, bones. Small bones, arranged in neat little piles throughout the wall space. And scratched into the wood around them were more messages. Help me. Let me out. Please hear me. I stumbled backward, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. But as I stood there, staring at the hole I'd made in the wall, I realized something that made my blood freeze. The knocking had stopped. For the first time in weeks, the house was completely silent. But the silence was worse than the knocking. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but before I could dial, I heard something that made my hand shake so violently I nearly dropped it. It was a voice, barely a whisper, coming from inside the wall. Thank you. I ran. I left everything behind and ran straight to my car. As I drove away, I looked back at the house one last time. In the window of the room where I'd torn into the wall, I saw a pale face watching me leave. I never went back to that house. I hired a company to pack up my things and put the house back on the market immediately. But before I left town, I did some research at the local library. The house had a history. In 1987, a family named the Hendersons lived there. They had a 10-year-old daughter named Sarah who went missing one night. She was never found, and the case went cold. The family moved away 6 months later, unable to bear living in the house where their daughter had vanished. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. The house has been sold and resold 17 times since then. Every family that moved and left within a year. The real estate records show the same pattern over and over. Families moving and full of hope, then leaving suddenly, often in the middle of the night. I found one former owner, an elderly man named Frank who lived there in the early 2000s. When I told him about the knocking, his face went white. He told me he'd heard it too, but he'd been too scared to investigate. He said the knocking got worse over time, more desperate, more urgent. He finally left when he started hearing crying along with the knocking. That was 6 months ago. I've moved 3 states away, but I still can't stop thinking about that house. About Sarah, about the bones in the walls, and the tally marks counting days that stretched into years. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if she's still there, still knocking, still hoping that someone will hear her and help her find her way out of those walls. And sometimes, when my new apartment is very quiet, I swear I can still hear it. 3 knocks, then silence. 3 knocks, then silence. Like she followed me here. Like she's trying to tell me something I'm not ready to hear. I've started sleeping with the lights on, but it doesn't help. Because I know now that some sounds can't be blocked out by light or noise or distance. Some sounds follow you wherever you go, echoing in your mind long after they've stopped. The knocking never really stops. It just moves from the walls to your dreams, from your dreams to your waking thoughts, until you can't tell the difference between what's real and what's just the memory of a little girl who's been trapped in the dark for far too long. I should have helped her. I should have called the police right away. Should have made sure she was found and properly buried. But I was too scared, too selfish. I ran, and I left her there, still knocking, still waiting for someone brave enough to listen. Now I live with the knowledge that somewhere in that house on Maple Street, Sarah Henderson is still scratching tally marks into the wood, still counting the days, still hoping that someone will hear her knocking and finally set her free. The Meridian office complex stands 37 floors high, piercing the night sky like a glass and steel needle. During the day, it buzzes with the energy of thousands of workers, but at night, it becomes my domain. My name is Marcus, and I've been working night shift security here for 3 years. What I'm about to tell you is the reason I'm finally quitting. It started small, like these things always do. Little sounds that shouldn't be there. Elevator dings at 3 a.m. when all the elevators were supposed to be locked down. The soft whisper of papers rustling when there should be no wind. Fluorescent lights flickering in patterns that seemed almost like Morse code. I told myself it was just an old building settling, electrical issues, maybe some late-working executive I'd missed during my rounds. But buildings don't breathe. The first time I heard it, I was sitting at the main security desk on the ground floor, watching the bank of monitors that showed feeds from every floor. It was 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in October. The sound was so faint I almost missed it, a slow, rhythmic inhale and exhale, like someone sleeping peacefully. It seemed to come from the walls themselves, from the very structure of the building. I checked every camera, every floor, every corner. Nothing. The building was empty except for me. The breathing continued for exactly 13 minutes, then stopped as abruptly as it had begun. I didn't report it. Who would believe me? Instead, I started paying closer attention during my rounds. The Meridian complex has a specific route we're supposed to follow. Start at the basement parking garage. Work your way up to the executive floors, then back down. The whole circuit takes about 2 hours if you're thorough. That's when I noticed them. The footprints. They appeared in the dust that accumulated in the less traveled areas of the building. Not shoe prints, bare feet. Adult-sized, with unusually long toes. They would appear overnight, sometimes following my exact route, sometimes branching off into areas I hadn't been. The cleaning crew worked during the day, so the prints would be gone by the next evening, only to reappear the following night. I started documenting everything. Photos of the footprints, recordings of the breathing sounds, detailed logs of every anomaly. My supervisor, Janet, thought I was losing it. She suggested I take some time off, maybe see a counselor, but I couldn't leave. Something was happening in this building, and I was the only one who knew about it. The elevators were the worst part. They would move on their own, despite being locked down for the night. I'd hear the mechanical whir of the motors, the soft ding of arrival, the whisper of doors opening and closing. When I checked the monitors, the elevator cars would be empty, but the weight sensors would register someone inside. Always the same weight, 147 pounds. One night in November, I decided to ride along. I waited until I heard the familiar sound of the elevator moving, then quickly pressed the call button. When the doors opened, the car was empty, but I could feel a presence inside. The air was colder, thicker somehow. I stepped in and pressed the button for the 15th floor, where the footprints had been most frequent. The elevator rose smoothly, but I wasn't alone. I could hear breathing again, soft and steady, coming from right beside me. When I looked in the polished steel of the elevator walls, I saw my reflection and the vague outline of something else. Tall, thin, with arms that seemed too long for its body. The elevator stopped at the 15th floor, and the doors opened. I stepped out, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness of the empty office space. The footprints were there, fresh in the dust, leading from the elevator to the far corner of the floor where the executive offices were located. I followed them. The trail led to the corner office of Harrison Meridian, the building's original owner, who had died in a construction accident during the building's construction in 1987. The office had been left exactly as it was on the day he died. His desk, his chair, even his coffee mug, all preserved behind glass like a museum exhibit. But the glass was broken. Shards littered the floor, and the footprints led right up to the desk. Sitting in Harrison's chair was a figure I could barely make out in the darkness. Tall and possibly thin, with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its eyes were dark holes in its face, and when it turned to look at me, I felt something cold crawl up my spine. "You're not supposed to be here," it said, its voice like the sound of paper tearing. I ran back to the elevator, jabbed the button for the ground floor, and didn't stop running until I was outside the building. I called in sick for the next 3 days, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. When I finally returned to work, I found a note on my desk. "Welcome to the night shift. You're not alone anymore." The note was written in spidery handwriting that looked like it belonged to another century. At the bottom was a signature, H. Meridian. That's when I understood. Harrison Meridian had died during the construction of his building, but he'd never left. He'd been trapped inside, walking the halls every night, waiting for someone to acknowledge his presence. The footprints, the breathing, the elevator rides. It was all him, trying to communicate, trying to be recognized. But knowing the truth didn't make it any easier. The encounters became more frequent. I would see him in the monitors, a dark shape moving through the corridors. Sometimes he would be standing right behind me in the reflection of the security desk glass, his hollow eyes watching everything I did. He never spoke again, but his presence was constant, a cold weight in the air that made every breath feel like drowning. The worst part was the realization that I wasn't the first security guard to experience this. I found journals hidden in the security office, written by my predecessors, all describing the same phenomena, the same footprints, the same breathing, the same encounters with the figure in the corner office. Some of the entries were from guards who had worked here decades ago. Each journal ended the same way, with the guard's resignation letter. One entry, dated just 6 months before I started working here, was particularly chilling. He's getting stronger. Last night, he spoke to me again. He said he's been waiting for someone to stay, someone to keep him company during the long nights. He said he's tired of being alone. I think he's trying to make me like him. I can feel something changing inside me. The cold is spreading. I need to get out before it's too late. That was the last entry. I tried to research what had happened to that guard, but there was no record of anyone quitting. According to the employment records, he had simply stopped showing up for work. No forwarding address, no final paycheck claimed. It was like he had vanished. Last night was my final shift. I was making my rounds when I noticed something different. The footprints in the dust weren't just Harrison's anymore. There were others, different sizes, different shapes, but all with that same unnatural length to the toes. It was like a whole group of people had been walking the halls. When I reached the 15th floor, I found them all. They were standing in the executive offices, dozens of them, all with that same hollow-eyed, impossibly thin appearance. Men and women, some in clothes from decades past, others in more recent attire. I recognized one of them from the employee photo board in the lobby, the security guard who had written the final journal entry. Harrison Meridian was standing in center of the group, and when he saw me, he smiled. It was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. "You've been such good company," he said, his voice echoing strangely in the empty office. "We've decided you should stay permanently." I felt the cold spreading through my body, starting from my feet and working its way up. My reflection in the office windows was starting to change, becoming thin and dark like theirs. I could feel myself becoming part of whatever they were, joining their eternal night shift. But I fought it. I don't know how, but I managed to break free from whatever hold they had on me. I ran for the stairs, not trusting the elevators, and didn't stop until I reached the ground floor. Behind me, I could hear them following, their footsteps echoing in the stairwell like a death march. I made it to my car and drove straight home. I spent the rest of the night writing this account, and when the sun came up, I called my supervisor and quit. I'm moving away from the city today. Far away. I've already packed my things and loaded my car, but before I go, I needed to warn whoever might take my place. The Meridian office complex is hiring for a new night shift security guard. The pay is good, the work is easy, and you'll never be alone. But that's exactly the problem. If you're reading this and you're thinking about taking that job, don't. Find something else, anything else. Because once you become part of the night shift at Meridian, you never really leave. And if you're the poor soul who ends up taking the job anyway, just remember, when you start hearing the breathing in the walls, when you see the footprints in the dust, when you meet Harrison Meridian in his corner office, you still have a choice. You can run like I did, or you can stay and join the others who thought they were just working night shift security. The choice is yours, but choose quickly, because the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to leave. And Harrison Meridian is always looking for new company during those long, dark hours when the building comes alive and the dead walk the halls of the Meridian office complex. I'm leaving now. I hope I never see another tall building again, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear the breathing. I never believed in the dark web stories until my brother David disappeared 3 months ago. Now I'm writing this because I need someone to know what really happened, and maybe warn others about what's lurking in those digital shadows. David was always the tech-savvy one in our family. While I struggled with basic computer tasks, he could navigate networks and systems like a digital ghost. He worked as a cybersecurity analyst, which meant he spent his days hunting down threats and exploring the darker corners of the internet. It was his job, but somewhere along the way, it became his obsession. The first sign something was wrong came on a Tuesday evening in March. I'd stopped by his apartment to borrow his car and found him hunched over 3 different monitors, his face illuminated by the eerie glow of encrypted browsers. His eyes were bloodshot, and empty coffee cups littered his desk like tombstones. "Jesus, David, when's the last time you slept?" I asked, moving closer to his setup. He quickly minimized his windows, but not before I caught a glimpse of what looked like a forum page with strange symbols and text that seemed to hurt my eyes just looking at it. The background was pure black, and the text appeared to be written in some kind of cipher. "Just work stuff," he muttered, but his voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. "You wouldn't understand." That should have been my first red flag, but I brushed it off. David had always been secretive about his work, claiming it was classified government contracts. I grabbed his keys and left, thinking nothing more of it. Over the next few weeks, David became increasingly paranoid. He started calling me at odd hours, rambling about watchers and digital footprints. He claimed people were following him, both online and in real life. When I suggested he take a break from work, he laughed bitterly. "You think this is about work? This goes deeper than any government agency. There are things moving in the deep web that shouldn't exist." I tried to get him to explain, but he would only say he'd found a forum where people discussed crossing over and digital transcendence. He mentioned something called the null path and claimed he was close to understanding something profound about the nature of reality itself. The last time I saw David was on a Friday night. He'd called me frantically, begging me to come over. When I arrived, his apartment was in chaos. Papers covered every surface, all filled with bizarre diagrams and symbols. His computers were running strange programs that seemed to pulse with their own rhythm. "I made contact," he whispered, gripping my shoulders with shaking hands. "They're not what we think they are. The forum, the users, they're something else entirely." He showed me his screen, and I immediately regretted looking. The forum he'd been obsessing over was called the Watcher's Circle, and it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The posts didn't seem to follow normal language patterns. Instead, they were filled with mathematical equations, strange symbols, and what appeared to be coordinates to locations that didn't exist on any map. "Look at this," David said, pointing to a particular thread titled The Crossing. "They're planning something, a mass event. They want to bring something through." "Through what?" I asked, but David was already typing a response to the thread. "I'm going to stop them," he said. "I've been tracking their patterns, their meeting places. Tonight, they're gathering at coordinates they posted yesterday." I begged him not to go, but David was beyond reason. He packed a bag with his laptop, some kind of signal detector, and strangely, a small mirror wrapped in black cloth. Before I could stop him, he was gone. That was 3 months ago. The police found his car abandoned at a rest stop 2 states away. His laptop was missing, but they found the mirror, shattered into 7 pieces. The official report stated there was no evidence of foul play, but several witnesses reported seeing strange lights in the sky that night. I tried to forget about it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that David's disappearance was connected to that forum. Against my better judgment, I decided to investigate. Using David's old backup computer, I managed to trace his digital footsteps back to the Watcher's Circle. What I found there still haunts me. The forum was more active than ever, with dozens of new posts celebrating something called the First Crossing. Users were sharing photos of empty clothes found in various locations, always accompanied by shattered mirrors. But what terrified me most was a post from a user with David's exact username, timestamped just hours after his disappearance. The post simply read, "The crossing is complete. The Watchers are no longer watching. They are here." I tried to contact the forum administrators, but my messages bounced back with error codes that shouldn't exist. When I attempted to screenshot the forum, my computer crashed, and all evidence of the Watcher's Circle vanished from my browser history. But the nightmare didn't end there. Strange things started happening around my apartment. I'd find my electronics turned on in the middle of the night, displaying static that seemed to form patterns. My phone would receive calls from numbers that didn't exist, playing audio that sounded like David's voice speaking in reverse. The worst part came last week. I was walking home from work when I saw him, or at least something that looked like David. He was standing across the street, perfectly still, staring at me with eyes that reflected light like a nocturnal animal's. When I called out his name, he smiled, but it was wrong somehow. Too wide, with too many teeth. "I've been waiting for you," he said, his voice carrying an electronic distortion. "The Watchers want to meet you. They have so much to show you." I ran, but I could hear him following, his footsteps echoing in ways that defied physics. When I finally reached my apartment and locked the door, I found my computer was on, displaying a message on the screen. "The forum awaits. Your brother is so lonely." I've been too scared to sleep. Every shadow seems to move. Every reflection shows something that isn't quite right. I keep finding mirrors in my apartment, small ones hidden in drawers and behind furniture. Each time I find one, it's already cracked, as if something tried to push through from the other side. I'm writing this as a warning to anyone who might stumble across the Watcher's circle or any similar forum. Whatever they are, they're not human, and they're not bound by the same rules that govern our reality. They use the internet as a hunting ground, luring curious minds into their web of digital horrors. If you ever find yourself on a forum that doesn't feel quite right, where the posts hurt your eyes and the users seem to know more about you than they should, close your browser immediately. Delete your history. Burn your computer if you have to, because once they notice you, once they mark you as a potential crossing candidate, there's no going back. I can hear them now, tapping at my windows with fingers that sound like breaking glass. My reflection in the bathroom mirror isn't moving when I move, and somewhere in the distance, I can hear David's voice calling my name, inviting me to join him in whatever digital hell he's been trapped in. The forum is still out there, waiting for the next curious soul to stumble across its pages. Don't be that person. Don't make the same mistake my brother did, because the Watchers aren't just watching anymore. They're recruiting, and they're very, very patient. If you're reading this and you can still see your reflection properly, consider yourself lucky. But if you notice it lagging behind your movements, even for a split second, then I'm sorry. You've already been marked, and the crossing has begun. The Watchers are coming, and they're bringing the digital darkness with them. Retriclawed can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. I never believed in the supernatural until I moved into apartment 4B at Willowbrook Heights. It's a decent building, nothing fancy, but the rent was reasonable and the location was perfect for my commute to work. I signed the lease without hesitation, eager to start fresh in a new city after my messy divorce. If I had known what was waiting for me, I would have kept looking. The first night passed without incident. I unpacked boxes, ordered pizza, and fell asleep on my air mattress while watching Netflix on my laptop. The second night was the same, but on the third night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., someone knocked on my door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I jolted awake, heart pounding. My phone screen illuminated the darkness. 2:17 a.m. Who could be knocking at this hour? I lived alone, didn't know any neighbors yet, and hadn't given my address to anyone except my employer. I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. The hallway was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb, and I could make out the silhouette of a person standing perfectly still. They were wearing what looked like a dark coat or jacket, but I couldn't make out any facial features. The figure just stood there, motionless, as if waiting. "Who is it?" I called out softly. No response. The figure didn't move. I waited several minutes, watching through the peephole. Finally, the person turned and walked away, disappearing around the corner toward the stairwell. I heard the heavy fire door close with a metallic clang. I convinced myself it was probably a drunk neighbor who got confused about which apartment was theirs. These things happen in apartment buildings. I went back to bed, though it took me another hour to fall asleep. The next night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. The same slow, measured rhythm. I grabbed my phone and crept to the door. The same figure stood in the hallway, perfectly still, wearing the same dark clothing. This time I could see they were wearing a hood that cast their face in complete shadow. "Hello," I called out louder this time. "Can I help you?" Nothing. The figure stood there for exactly 3 minutes. I timed it, then turned and walked away. By the 5th night, I was dreading 2:17 a.m. I tried staying awake, thinking that maybe if I was already up, it wouldn't happen. But at 2:17 a.m. sharp, the knocking came. 3 slow knocks, just like always. I yanked the door open this time, determined to confront whoever was doing this. The hallway was empty, completely empty. I stepped out and looked in both directions. No one. The stairwell door was closed, and when I checked it, it was locked from the inside. You needed a key to open it from the hallway side. How had they disappeared so quickly? And how had they gotten through a locked door? I started losing sleep. Every night I'd lie awake, watching the clock creep toward 2:17 a.m. Some nights I'd try to sleep through it, but the knocking always woke me up. Other nights I'd wait by the door, but the figure never stayed long enough for me to get a good look at them. I complained to the building manager, Mrs. Chun, but she just looked at me like I was crazy. "Nobody else has reported any problems," she said. "Maybe it's just the building settling. Old buildings make all sorts of noises." But I knew what I was hearing. Those weren't settling noises. Those were deliberate knocks. I started asking my neighbors if they'd heard anything. The couple in 4A said they were heavy sleepers and hadn't noticed anything unusual. The old man in 4C claimed he'd been hearing strange noises for years, but had learned to ignore them. The woman in 4D just shook her head and hurried away from me like I was contagious. 3 weeks into this nightmare, I decided to set up my phone to record the hallway. I cracked my door open just enough to slide my phone through, positioning it to capture whoever was knocking. At 2:17 a.m., I heard the familiar sound. Knock, knock, knock. I waited until I heard the stairwell door close, then retrieved my phone. My hands were shaking as I played back the recording. The hallway was empty, the entire time. I could hear the knocking clearly on the audio, but there was no one there. No figure, no shadow, nothing. That's when I started to suspect this wasn't just some weirdo neighbor. I did some research on the building's history. It took some digging, but I found an old newspaper article from 1987. A woman named Sarah Hendricks had lived in apartment 4B, my apartment. She'd been found dead in her living room, apparently from a heart attack. But what caught my attention was a detail mentioned by her neighbors in the weeks before her death. She'd been complaining about someone knocking on her door every night at 2:17 a.m. The police had investigated but found no evidence of an intruder. They'd concluded that the stress of the harassment had contributed to her fatal heart attack. She was only 34 years old. I started having panic attacks. Every night at 2:17 a.m., those 3 knocks would come, and I'd lie in bed paralyzed with fear. I stopped sleeping. I started taking caffeine pills to stay awake during the day. My work performance suffered. I was becoming a wreck. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. When the knocking started, I grabbed a baseball bat I'd bought for protection and yanked the door open. "What do you want?" I screamed into the empty hallway. "What do you want from me?" That's when I heard it. A voice, so faint I almost missed it, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Let me in." I slammed the door shut and triple locked it, but the knocking continued. Not just 3 knocks this time, but continuous knocking that went on for hours. Knock, 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 knock. My neighbors surely had to hear it now. But when I called Mrs. Chun in tears, she said nobody else had complained. I started researching Sarah Hendricks more thoroughly. I found her obituary, which mentioned that she'd been a night shift nurse at the local hospital. She'd gotten off work at 2 a.m. every night. She would have been arriving home around 2:17 a.m. The knocking wasn't random. It was timed to her old schedule. But why was this happening to me? I'd never met Sarah Hendricks. I'd never even heard of her before moving into this apartment. What connection could there possibly be? That's when I found the second obituary. Sarah Hendricks had a younger brother named David. David Hendricks had died in a car accident in 1989. 2 years after Sarah's death. According to the obituary, David had been struggling with grief and guilt over his sister's death. He'd been the one who found her body. The obituary mentioned that David had been convinced someone was stalking his sister before her death. He'd spent months investigating, trying to find the person responsible for the nightly harassment that had scared her to death. He'd installed security cameras, hired a private investigator, even camped out in the hallway some nights. But he'd never found anyone. David had died when his car crashed into a tree on Willowbrook Drive, just 3 blocks from this building. The accident happened at 2:17 a.m. I stared at the obituary photo of David Hendricks. He was wearing a dark jacket, and something about his posture looked familiar. My blood ran cold as I realized where I'd seen that silhouette before. David was still trying to protect his sister. Even in death, he was patrolling the building, making sure no one was threatening the residents of 4B. But in his confused, ghostly state, he'd become the very thing he'd been trying to protect Sarah from. The knocking came again that night, but this time I was ready. When I heard the 3 slow knocks, I walked to the door and spoke clearly. "David, I know who you are. I know you're trying to protect this place, but you're scaring people. You're doing exactly what someone did to Sarah. You need to let go." The knocking stopped. I waited by the door for an hour, but nothing happened. No footsteps, no door closing, nothing. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. It was written in shaky handwriting on yellowed paper. "I'm sorry. I just wanted to keep her safe. Tell her I'm sorry." I never heard the knocking again, but sometimes, late at night, I catch a glimpse of a figure in a dark jacket standing at the end of the hallway, just watching. Not threatening, just watching, making sure everyone is safe. I still live in apartment 4B. I've gotten used to having a guardian ghost, but I always make sure to lock my door at night, and I never, ever open it at 2:17 a.m., because even though David means well, some doors are better left closed. Last week, a new tenant moved into 4D. She's a young woman, lives alone, works late shifts. Yesterday, she mentioned to me that she's been hearing strange noises at night. It's probably just the building settling. I told her exactly what Mrs. Chen had told me, but I know better. And tonight, I'm going to be listening very carefully at 2:17 a.m., because some protectors never know when to stop protecting.